So I would like to introduce our museum director, Dr. Jay Shu, to give some welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so very much for coming. And I'm really touched. There's such an enthusiastic response to this evening's program. And like many of the friends here standing, I have happily given up my seat. So I'll be standing with you, and enjoy this wonderful evening's program. And we're truly delighted and honored to collaborate with our beloved San Francisco Opera to presenting arguably the most important and classical novel in China called Dream of the Red Chamber. It is such an unprecedented event, and it's an epoch-making event that, in my opinion, and you can tell from the attendance of this evening, it is truly remarkable. And to make this happen, so many people have put in the effort. But for this evening's program, I would particularly like to thank our speakers, Stephen Roddy, who is a specialist, renowned specialist of the story, Dream of the Red Chamber, so he can tell us all about it, give us some tips when we eventually go to see the opera. And also our world-famous composer, Bright Sun, a friend from a long time ago, and great to watch his career, and really truly a brilliant composer, and he is a composer for the opera. So today's star, as much as the characters in the operas, are these two wonderful colleagues. And putting this evening program together, I must single out a few colleagues of SF Opera, starting with Kip Craner and Elisa Stone. I think Elisa and Kip may be both here, there somewhere. And also, of course, our new SF Opera General Director, Matthew Shelvok. Actually, I would like to extend an official welcome to Matthew to coming to our museum and his appointment as the SF Opera, starting with such a high note. But I also have to ask him for forgiveness, because just as I have gladly given up my seat, we have given up his seat as well. So Matthew, so I hope that I can make it up to you someday. But thank you so very much for coming. And these two organizations, often the case, collaborate because there's numerous operas have Asian connections to it. And we have always been strong partners. But this opera is singular. It's really, really very special. For give you two reasons. And the story, of course, took place in the Qing Dynasty, featuring the tale of star-crossed lovers from very wealthy, noble families, and the art they collected. For example, the male character Bao Yu, the jade locket, he always wore on his neck, as well as antique ceramics, as well as contemporary paintings, as well as jades, enamels, lacquers, garments, clothing, everything that they surrounded themselves and they grew up and lived with. You can find fine examples in our collection, right out there. That's why many of you, when you come in, we give you a map highlighting a few pieces that are relevant to that time period and relevant to the artistry that the novel was a big part of it too. And in addition to this is the museum's 50th anniversary. To celebrate this landmark year for the Asian Art Museum, right downstairs beneath this hall, we have a magnificent exhibition from the National Palace Museum, Taipei. The exhibition called Emperor's Treasures. And several emperors, particularly the 18th century Emperor Qianlong, that was during his time. The novel was composed, and the novel was the actions supposed to have taken place during his time, when China was very, very prosperous. And so in that exhibition, you may say every single object is Emperor's Treasures, and they are world class. This is the only third time that museum traveled its collection to America. The last time was 20 years ago, another generation. So for many youngsters here, you may have never seen them. For those of us who are old enough to see it, it's another story, another new generation. So timing is just perfect. So our two organizations can work together to present to you this magnificent opportunity for the Dream of the Red Chamber. So I want to end my remarks by acknowledging and thanking SF Opera for taking the leadership to not only to feature this wonderful novel, but put together a star groups. And we will hear from some of them this evening. So without further ado, let me welcome to the podium our new director, Matthew Shelvock of SF Opera. Thank you, and good evening.
Good evening. This is incredible to see so many people here tonight. We have had such incredible collaborations with the Asian Art Museum over these years, and in this room and in other spaces have together explored collaborative connections between art and music. And I have always found that here at the Asian Art Museum, there is always curiosity, there is always great insight, there's always great engagement. And we absolutely adore working with Jay and his staff to find these bridges between worlds of art. And to me, there's nothing greater than finding connections between the visual arts and the musical arts. It's something which enriches my love of music, and events like tonight, I hope, will enrich yours as well. Jay and his staff have been so supportive of this project. It has been now something which has been in the melting pot for a couple of years at San Francisco Opera, and through the whole process, the Asian Art Museum has been a great partner. Jay serves on our Dream of the Red Chamber committee at the opera, which looks to not only fundraise, but also inspire enthusiasm and understanding of this piece and what we are hopefully going to produce as a very sensitive portrayal of this piece in just a month's time. At the opera, we specialize in bringing to life new and interesting worlds on stage. Every night we have a different world on our stage, and it is a real privilege to be able to bring to life this world, which is a world that many of us at the opera were not familiar with before, but of course is an absolutely central work in Chinese classical literature. And to be able to tell that story, to be able to tell it, again, hopefully with great sensitivity and nuance, and bring that work to our audiences in the Opera House on the 6 performances that we have coming up, it is a real honor to be able to do that, to be entrusted with that kind of really important work in the Chinese canon. And as Jay said, we have an incredible team lined up to bring it to life, headed, of course, by our composer, Bright Sheng, who you will meet later tonight, but also the librettist, David Henry Wong, our director, the Taiwanese director, Stan Lai, and our Chinese designer, Tim Yip, amongst others. And they have worked like a dream team, shall we say, to really find an inner core of this story. The story is 5 volumes long in its English translation. It was the equivalent, well, it's probably even more than the equivalent of our reduction of Moby Dick a few years ago, to find a real dramatic center of this piece. And they have done a beautiful job with that. And I hope that you will learn more about that tonight, but also coming and joining us at the Opera House in early September. So tonight is about delving into this work. It is a fascinating work. It is the kind of work, as with all great literature, that you can spend a lifetime studying. And I know that we are merely scratching the surface of it here, but hopefully creating real interest in delving further into the work, not only at the opera, but beyond. So this has been a great journey for me and all my colleagues at the opera. As I speak, there is a chorus rehearsal going on stage. The set arrived on stage tonight for the very first time. It is being built in our workshops down in Burlingame, and is finally coming together, and it is just one of those great moments where you see all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle getting slotted in, and our chorus is on stage for the first time with the director beginning their journey as the piece moves from the rehearsal room into the theater. So it's a very exciting time for us, and a little daunting when we count the number of weeks left till opening night. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker tonight, who will speak for a little bit before being joined by our composer, Bright Sheng. Dr. Stephen Roddy is Professor of Modern and Classical Languages at the University of San Francisco. He has a PhD in East Asian Studies from Princeton, and he specializes in Chinese and Japanese literature of the 18th and 19th centuries, and I believe is someone who is distinguished holder of that great title, a rhodologist, somebody who really understands the deep connections of this work, the deep connections both to Chinese history and society, anthropology, and all of the different facets that are so richly interwoven into Dream of the Red Chamber. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you tonight to Dr. Stephen Roddy. Thank you very much.
Have my book right here. So let me just see if this works. Let's see. Good. Thank you all for coming tonight. I should first introduce a personal note. This was the first novel I ever read in Chinese, too many years ago to count, and it introduced me to the field. I've been in this field ever since. It was my first love, and of course, first loves are unforgettable. Fortunately, my wife is also an avid fan, so if she weren't, I would be in trouble. So, Bright Sheng and David Huang have given us a distilled essence of this, as we heard, 2,000-plus page masterpiece of Chinese literature. The result is an enchanting new version of the tale in a new medium and a new language, an ambitious meld of modern operatic idiom and 18th century Chinese literary and cultural forms. Like you, I can't wait to see the opera in just a few weeks, and we're so lucky tonight to have a sneak preview of a couple of the arias. So reading it, yes, I was particularly impressed by how the two authors of the libretto have used what in Chinese is called baimiao. It's literally a kind of monochromatic spare brushstroke. And in painting, it evokes the mood of a scene, but of course, not the details. So they've used this technique to really convey the essence of the novel with elegant simplicity. So tonight I'd like to just sketch out a few of these themes here, and to also suggest how they've developed some literary and musical ideas in the original into new directions. So the opera gives us three layers of the book, or we might say three cornerstones. First, its philosophical or allegorical frame. Second, its political and social commentary. And third, the romantic triangle, consisting of the young heir that we heard about, Bao Yu, of the Jia family, and his two cousins, Xue Baochai and Lin Daiyu. At the beginning, a crazed monk introduces the novel's allegorical dimensions by revealing the supernatural origins of these characters. One being a crimson flower, and the other, Bao Yu, a rather eccentric stone. We don't know what he really looked like, but we do know that the actual Bao Yu did, as Jay mentioned, wear a piece of jade. The monk also introduces a mirror, the mirror of illusion, which is a symbol of both self-knowledge but also self-delusion in this novel, but also in a lot of other Chinese works. Secondly, the novel can be read as a commentary on 18th century social and political mores, mainly through the dissolute or, alternatively, pedantic men of the Jia family. Since none of these men appear in the opera, however, this theme has been transposed to some of the women in the family, namely Madame Wang, who is Bao Yu's actual mother, and also his sister, the Princess Yuan Chun, who's Madame Wang's older daughter and the granddaughter of Grandmother Jia. So these are really the main older characters in the story. And this theme of corruption has been transposed into a kind of effort by Madame Wang and his sister Yuan Chun to rescue the family from crushing debts. And thirdly, the love between Bao Yu and Daiyu is the core of the novel, and it's fully front and center in this operatic version as well. Here, the librettist's spare baimiao, their very light and economical touch, is evident in their decision to focus entirely on the two lovers, as well as their relationship with Xue Baochai, the rival. In the novel, however, the lovers' interactions range from blissful to fractious, due in part to the fact that they live in a very complex family, an extended compound consisting of really dozens of relatives and many other servants. And in fact, they not only share the stage with the servants, but they also interact with them quite frequently. The servants are very important to the story. Sometimes they're even romantic partners. On this last point, Chinese novels tend to be filled with lots and lots of characters, huge casts, miscellaneous, socially heterogeneous, even more so than the novels that we might be more familiar with, like Tolstoy's War and Peace. For obvious reasons, Bright, Sheng, and David Huang have excised the vast majority of these many secondary characters. But I can't resist asking about the absence of one of them, one of my favorites, actually, Bao Yu's shrewish cousin on his mother's side, Wang Xifeng. I have a theory about why she isn't here, and I'll ask Bright in a minute to talk about her in more detail, because she does have a lot of fans. I'm not the only one. As I've said, the opera incorporates selected allegorical, societal, and romantic themes of the original work, and conveys something of their intricate, interlocking structure. In the book, the love story resonates deeply with various philosophical currents, prominent in both the literary and more broadly cultural traditions. Its love is framed as the impossible pursuit of an enchanting illusion, which in Chinese is called huan. And by the way, this word huan in Japanese is pronounced gen, and you may be familiar if you know about the No drama. Gen is the word, half of the word yugen, which is considered, it's translated sometimes as mystery, but it's really the aesthetic principle of the No drama. As beautiful as Dai Yu and Bao Yu's love may be, in the Buddhist scheme of things, it is, as the monk tells us, a mixed blessing. For those seeking enlightenment, love, or in Chinese, qing, is a delusion that arises from attachment to worldliness, and hence must be forsaken. Again, as the monk advises the rock and the flower. In much of the literature of the Ming and Qing periods, however, qing, or love, takes on transcendental, even cosmic dimensions as an instrument for gaining divine inspiration and ultimately self-knowledge. And thus, the two lovers in both book and opera take the plunge into the human world to imbibe this powerful potion, and through it, to achieve genuine, experientially based insight. The duality of love as both delusion and ethereal love, the duality of love as both delusion and illumination is evident in the opera too. But in the book, an alternative to this love is posed in the character of Xue Baochai, the third of that trio. Although she's somewhat calculating in the book as well, she articulates a kind of realistic, hard-headed view of marriage and family that is not without merit, even if Dai Yu and Bao Yu both reject it. So the novel opens with a fairly long commentary about the characters by an antique dealer. It might be good to look at the pieces that are on display that Jay was just talking about, the porcelain, the jade, the screen, because these are the kinds of objects that the Jias had to sell off periodically to raise cash. So the antique dealer gives us a kind of a very clear-eyed assessment of the members of the family. Bao Yu, he says, is far too spoiled. He's too impractical to prevent the disasters that are looming on the horizon. But even if he weren't so metal-headed, the tendency to put off making difficult decisions is shared really by all of the characters in the book. None of them can fully face the truth. And so this plays out in the subsequent 118 chapters that follow his prediction. These characters are loath to awaken from their dreamlike splendor, the enchanting illusion of huan, and face the hard, cold facts of life. Even the outspoken Dai Yu, Lin Dai Yu, is generally blind to the consequences of her own willful, self-destructive temperament. She, more than any of the other dozen or so girls in Bao Yu's life, epitomizes feminine nobility and the disdain for crass worldly ambition, utterly unlike the boys and men who disgust Bao Yu by what he calls their muddy ways. But this uncompromising quality is what finally seals Lin Dayu's fate as well. So as I've said, the opera condenses the novel's complexities, really there are multiple stories in the book, into the spare but richly resonant retelling of the story as the two lovers' rejection of their elders' demands on the one hand, and the rival Xue Baochai's attempts to further her family's status by edging out Daiyu and marrying Baoyu at the end. These narrative threads follow a well-worn plotline in the musical theater and fiction of the Ming and Qing periods, where infatuated lovers often defy the older generation, who were expected, of course, to arrange their marriages for them, and they strike out on their own to find love. In the novel, Baoyu and Daiyu share copies of the libretti of two of the most famous of these works, Peony Pavilion, Mudanting, and the Western Chamber, Xixiangji. They recite their favorite arias from them, which in turn awaken and quicken their love for each other. This literary stimulus also complements the frequent exchange of poetic compositions by the main characters. Daiyu is by far and away the most accomplished poet among the many talented girls in the book. She helps Baoyu to polish a poem when his sister, the princess Yuan Chun, comes to visit the garden. Moreover, she's also an excellent calligrapher, an eloquent philosopher, and most of all, a gifted player of this instrument, the qin, or the guqin. This instrument is the most sublime, pure musical instrument of the tradition, and it was praised by Confucius himself over 2,500 years ago. So in the novel, Daiyu and Baoyu are passionate about uninhibited self-expression. They're both also masters at revealing their innermost thoughts, their authentic love, their qing, through poetry, music, calligraphy, and even other arts. The many allusions to these cultivated pursuits are what makes the novel such fascinating reading for students of Chinese culture. It's a treasure trove of ideas about aesthetics, and especially about lyricism. Although Baoyu and Daiyu predominate in this, many of the other young women, including Baochai, are also connoisseurs of the arts, and their witty repartee enlivens many gatherings, poetry gatherings, garden parties, and so forth. And these take up quite a bit of space in the original novel. So obviously, a 3-hour or so opera in English could not begin to incorporate these many abstruse dimensions of the novel. But the twin motifs of poetry and music that Bright and David have highlighted do capture something of this literary and musical flavor. Lyric poetry is the supreme vehicle of self-expression in the literati tradition. And music came to symbolize and embody the ideal of harmonizing, or he, or we might say entente, a kind of understanding between either friends or lovers. That is, the musical performer and his or her audience, usually audience of one. Among the various words for love used in the book, 知音, or the knowing listener, specifically refers to this notion. That is, music that arises from the core heart, the core of the player's inner being, which meets with total, complete understanding from not just anyone, but the discerning listener, the 知音. And not coincidentally, this is the word that Baoyu and Daiyu use most often to describe their relationship. But of course, most of the time they're fighting, so whether they really mean it is sometimes in question. So, these two ideals of lyrical self-expression and musical harmony predominate in the opera's version of the love story between Daiyu and Baoyu. Through them, the characters achieve this kind of mutual entente, this 知音, but of course, eventually they're thwarted by the older generation of women, in league with Baochai, this young rival. The opera has beautifully refashioned some of the most memorable scenes of Daiyu and Baoyu's encounters, such as their first meeting at grandmother's apartment, the visit to the family garden by the princess, and Dai's burial of flower petals that we just heard about. All, in part at least, by juxtaposing these multiple layers of lyrical and musical expression. And that brings me back to the character that I just mentioned, Wang Xifeng. And her role in the novel is really as a kind of comic relief for much of it. So amidst all this tragedy and terrible misunderstanding that goes on, she makes people laugh and she brings people together. She patches up quarrels, and she has a very important role in fixing the family finances, although ultimately her role is questionable. She's extremely witty and very sharp of tongue, very intelligent, but she's not schooled in the finer arts, particularly either poetry or music. So unlike her peers, such as the young widow Li Wan, another woman of her age, she doesn't even try to write a single poem in the entire book. So I'm thinking maybe it was for this reason that Bright and David excluded her, along with the vulgar male characters that Bao Yu detests, including, most of all, perhaps his father, but most of his uncles, in fact, all of them, and most of his cousins, too. He really doesn't like men too much, or boys for that matter. So in their place, Bao Chai and her mother, Madame Xue, and of course Bao Yu's own mother, Madame Wang, they're recast as the kind of worldly, calculating foils to the selfless lovers, Bao Yu and Dai Yi, the purity of their love. So finally, let me say just a word about the fate of Princess Yuan Chun. In both the opera and in the novel, she's subject to the whims of the emperor and the intrigues of palace politics. However, the novel has her die of illness rather than being wrongly executed by her enemies in the palace. Her death in the novel marks a quickening of the family's decline, since her disappearance means the figural end of the spring-like efflorescence of love and material prosperity. And in fact, her name means literally, Yuan Chun means original love, or original spring, or origin spring. And spring, of course, in Chinese, doubles as love, romantic love, and all sorts of other things. By turning her into a more obvious symbol of political and personal catastrophe than she is in the novel, the opera appears to be affirming what we know of the intentions of the original author, Cao Xueqin. So for those of you who don't know, the book is actually, as we know, 120 chapters, 4 volumes in Chinese, 5 volumes in English. The last 40 chapters are demonstrably not written by the original author, Cao Xueqin. And according to some commentary that we have of the first 80 chapters that was written by either friends and/or relatives of Cao, he planned to leave the Jias basically completely destitute at the end of the novel, destroyed, utterly destroyed. So that was his original intention. However, he died before he could actually finish the book. So Gao E, about 3 decades after his death, was given the task of writing the ending. And according to various accounts, he did have a number of manuscripts and other material to go on. So he either wrote most of, or at least partially rewrote what was still existing of the last 40 chapters, if they indeed existed. However, in these 40 chapters, Gao softens this very harsh verdict on the Jia family. He allows them to keep their position at court. Even though they are temporarily disgraced, they come back at the end. And moreover, Gao, this second author, even makes or lets Bao Chai become pregnant after their marriage, after her marriage to Bao Yu. And so even though Bao Yu leaves the novel as a monk, he leaves also the seed of the future generation in Bao Chai, and the family, at least theoretically, can carry on. By contrast, Bright and David's version has restored what could be seen as the original author's dissidence against the staid orthodoxy of 18th century thought and culture. He had a subversive streak, apparently, that Gao and his other fellow editors apparently thought it best to expunge. Moreover, the opera, David and Bright, appear to hint at this kind of subversiveness also by clothing the family, at least mentioned at the beginning of the libretto, as wearing Ming Dynasty costumes. The book, however, is, although not clearly set in the Qing court or the Qing dynasty, it's very clear by implication that it takes place in either the late 17th or the 18th century. It's very much an autobiographical novel based on the author's own experiences. So it's interesting, I think, that the authors of the libretto have given us this tantalizing hint, not only that they've reverted to the original author's intention, but they're even making the family perhaps rebellious, or at least passive resistors, to the Manchu-dominated court of the Qing dynasty. So I'd actually like to follow up on that point by asking Bright to come to the stage now and answer that question. This family, anyway, are rebels to the Qing order. And is it because the Ming, particularly the late Ming, which is mentioned in the libretto, was a time of experimentation, of individuality sort of gone to extremes? And the novel, in many ways, actually takes up that thread of late Ming culture and late Ming social kind of nonconformity. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the thought behind this very subtle hint.
Well, as you know, at the end of the beginning of the Qing, the Manchus were not considered authentic Chinese. So this was there was rebellious, even though the Ming were defeated by the Manchus. So there was definitely a rebellious spirit. But I think we didn't really emphasize that, especially now in the version that you're going to see. I don't think there is a lot of essence of that we would think the Ming Dynasty, they addressed. I don't know. I think the dress that Tim, by the way, you saw some of the three, the boy and the two young lady in the photo. That was from the 2010 TV series, Made in China, and the designer of which was the same designer who's doing our show, Tim Yip. So he is really familiar with all periods of dresses and costumes and even the chairs and tables. And we had a meeting, and somebody wanted, well, the director, Stan, wanted a stool. So they brought in a whole list of pictures of things. He said, no, that's from the Tang Dynasty. That's Ming, that's Yuan, that's not right. But this is Qing Dynasty. So he knew exactly which style from which period. And I think his costumes are a little bit abstract, which is really beautiful. But based on, I don't really know which period. But in the libretto, you probably read that we had some Ming Dynasty. I think during the Qing Dynasty, if you had a Ming Dynasty house and furniture, calligraphy hanging on your wall, that's considered classical. Just like we have, 18th century European painting on your wall, and that is really cool. So that's kind of thing, and it's part of the tradition. I don't think we really try to make that a big statement on that.
Thanks. Okay, well, covered that, but I want to push this idea of subversiveness a little bit further. In the book, wealth is certainly an important factor. Wealth corrupts, but it's part of a sort of broad nexus. In Chinese society, the merchant class were certainly not as powerful as in the West, where mercantilism in the same period, of course, was strong. In the opera, however, you seem to perhaps for aesthetic reasons more than anything, sort of juxtapose true love, the love of the lovers, pure love, with this kind of grasping merchant greed of the Xue family. So I'm wondering if this might be, in fact, a topical reference, maybe not to the Qing dynasty or classical China, but to the present. Is there any attempt here to either make this more universal or perhaps make it relevant to our current day?
Well, there's always nice to have a reference to current day because we can all relate to that. Yes, so during that time, during the Qing dynasty, if you have official position in the court, that means a lot more than you merely have money. And so we borrowed in the story that in the opera, we borrowed the true story of the Cao's own family. That his father, some say his grandfather, Cao Ying, whose mother, in other words, Cao Xueqing's grandmother, who's what do they call Naima?
Paternal grandmother?
Not paternal, Naima.
The wet nurse.
Yeah, wet nurse for Kangxi. So his father essentially grew up with Kangxi, so they had an intimate, very close relationship. So he was like in the equivalent nowadays, you have a red phone, you can call the president, call the emperor, and he could write to the emperor. So, but they owed, this is a true story, they owed over 3 million liang, which is ounces, more than ounces, of silver, royal debt. And that's a true story. And there was a true story that Kangxi wrote to him, his father, said somebody just wrote to me, said you owed over 3 million ounces of silver, royal silver. But I counted it only over 1 million. And maybe you can just try to pay it back. But there's no way they can pay back from their salary. There's no way. And they spend most of the money on him, on the emperor, because Emperor Kangxi went to, from Beijing, went to visit the southern part of China and stay in their house. And his mother was like his mother, because Emperor Kangxi didn't grow up with a mother, because those days, the mother was not allowed in the palace. He was brought up by the wet nurse, and so he treated like the mother. So they had a very close relationship. And then after Kangxi died, Yongzheng, his son, and came on board. It's very much like nowadays Xi Jinping is starting to take care of the corruption. And of course their family will, all the fortune were confiscated and all that. So we borrowed that because we needed a crisis for the opera. And I thought, that's a great opera. But in the novel, it's kind of implied, but it wasn't totally spelled out. Well, we thought, okay, now this is a great story. So at the beginning of the opera, everybody in the family realizes this is a great problem. It's like a sword on your neck. Anytime you're gonna have a big problem if somebody asks for the money to pay back. We didn't spell out this 3 million ounces of silver, but this is a problem. So the only solution for the family is to marry, for the son to marry somebody who's super rich. And that was but it didn't come out that way. Eventually they got married, but didn't work out that way. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention is in the novel, there's, I have a question for you as a redologist. What is this novel about?
Good question. Well, I think it's about life, obviously. It's sort of a kaleidoscope through a dark lens, a dream of reality, and it gives us so many insights into the life of this very complicated family, the life of love, the lovers, and the broader dimensions of society as well, because there is, even though it's very much focused on this love story, there's a lot going on both in the broader, wider family. It's a huge extended family, as Chinese families often are, especially rich ones. But there's a lot going on that interfaces with the court, with politics, and with society as a whole. So many people read it as a kind of either a philosophical allegory. It has very complicated, very rich resonance with the Buddhist, Taoist, and general philosophical tradition. But it's also read, my teacher used to say, as the first crack in the collapse of traditional China, that this was a book that in a way predicted the end, because it showed so many of the problems, that people were living beyond their means, that they were simply not interested in preparing for the future. And many people would say that was the problem as early as the mid-18th century.
So it's a long answer. He hasn't quite finished. So to sum up, there are many schools of thoughts on what this the novel is about. And then we should, so to me, it could be a myth, because there are over 400 characters and over 40 main characters, and each one's vividly described, written about. But there are two of them, Bao Yu and Dai Yu. Those were two fairies or gods, actually descended stone and a flower. By the way, our stone and flower in the opera is much better looking than the pictures he had. You would be so touched by it. But in any case, they come down to earth, want to fulfill the earthly love. But the mundane society is so cruel and so snobbish. So they prevent it. So we have brought this preordained love put on the front and use the novel, the triangle in the novel as the front story. And then we put all the political intrigues and the struggle in the palace and the family debt problem, financial problem, all these other things as a political backdrop. And every problem they have contributed to the tragedy of this love affair, because they wanted to come down to earth. Although they didn't know, they reincarnated, they don't realize, but they kind of felt there's attraction, there's something that's special about their love. But it's not right away soulmates. It took a while. She knew, Dai Yu knew from the beginning. And then he, being a playboy, being a spoiled, a princely like, and his father, his sister is a princess, and now the favorite of the emperor. And of course, he had a lot of women, and that answers another question: why we cut out all the males? Because there's a saying that he lives in the female kingdom. So he's all surrounded by women. So we have a male chorus. The San Francisco has a great male chorus. We only use them at the very beginning, the prelude, the prologue, and at the very end, as beggars, actually. And then most of the time, once we start the real on earth from heaven, prologue is in this heaven, and the stone and the flower wanted to come down to earth. Once they are in earth, on earth, and they're all females, the whole female chorus and servants, dancers, and all female, except that you have 3 eunuchs coming in and out. And those are male singers, but mostly female. And the Bao Yu is the only one male living in this kingdom. So we wanted to create this. The red chamber is not only red, but it means the feminine and he's surrounded by these beautiful women. And so how this, I mean, he thought he could do anything. I mean, he thought he could, with his life, that style he had, he could achieve everything, anything he wants. And then finally, you know, it's also a story in our approach is boy come of age at the end. He realizes he had to make a stand, make a statement for his own life, take charge of his own life. And so that's our story. Of course, it's a tragic story, but a very beautiful ending, which I would not reveal. Be a spoiler, and you have to come to see it. And yes, and so.
Thank you. We're just about out of time. We'll open it up in just a second, but maybe you could just give us a preview. We haven't talked about the music, both as a theme of the story, which I mentioned in my remarks, but also the music itself. Are you at all indebted to any traditional Chinese kunqu or Peking opera or Shaoxing
I don't
versions
know.
of the
I
story?
mean, I grew up with all kinds of music, Western music, Chinese music, classical music. So I write the music I find most attractive to me and enhancing the drama and the beauty. So I hope you will be, if you come to the opera, what I hope is that you will be drawn in by the story and the music drama, and also touched, moved by the story. And you were totally caught up by the characters. And that is a funny thing, because that's what art's supposed to do, is bring the audience into our world, or a world that's unreal. So make you forget about. And we do silly things as an audience. We laugh for no reason, we cry for no reason. But we are caught up because at that time, for those minutes, we forget about our existence. We are, for lack of better word, kind of in a transcending mood. And that's what we try to approach. And I want to say something about opera. Opera, as you know, very expensive. So to answer your question, why we don't have Wang Xifeng? Because budget. That's one of the reasons. Because, well, you know, and also she has her character is a very colorful character in the novel, but it's not essential to the story. We could take out her, and then we hire one less singer, costumes, and all that, and also not essential to the story. But opera is expensive, and it takes a truly a great teamwork. It's not only the creative team. We have a dream team. I have a dream team. I often say I'm smart because I work with the best people in the world, and to make me or my music look better. But I think it's also all the cast, all the staff, stage hands, stage manager, the opera house, everything. And this is in, I've written few operas, not a lot, but it is the first time I feel this has a chance. But why do we do opera? Because when everything clicks, art, music, visual art, everything clicks, is nothing like opera, this experience. So I think we have a very good chance to do that.
And we're waiting for that.